Hi, and welcome to the Red Tunic Podcast, a podcast where I look to rediscover what makes gaming fun and enjoyable by having positive conversations with those related to the industry. Today I'm joined by Nikko, developer at EnHouse Studios and developer of the upcoming game Glitched. Hi, Nikko, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right, thanks for asking. So, Nikko, before we get all started, why don't you tell the listeners about yourself so that way people know who you are?
Yeah, so I'm Nico. I'm a developer at a small indie company called EnHouse Studios, and we're developing Glitched, which is going to come out this year. It's our first major release. It's been in development for about 4 years now. It was kickstarted back in late 2016, and it's a pretty ambitious, big project. So development has been, 4 years, and this is our first major release. And yeah, Glitched is going to launch this year, and it's a sort of meta RPG, really meaty, lots of hours. It'll be available on Steam, PC, eventually to the consoles too. Yeah, and I'm just excited to hear talk about the industry, talk about video games, and that sort of stuff.
Awesome. And thank you for joining us, as I said. And I tried your demo for Glitched, and I thought it was a really unique approach to just how it was working. I know the system, sorry, this mechanics and systems. I thought it was really unique. Especially I liked that with the essences in that, what you did is going to influence how those work and uh, how like that will influence your skills and all of that. So I think that's a really cool like idea for the system, and I had a lot of fun trying out the demo. I thought it was just a really unique and quirky game, as well as like just the system for the mechanics. And I wanted to mention that before we went anywhere.
Yeah, I think with the Essence system, I think when we were first like fleshing out that system, I was getting really, I guess, not fed up, but sort of frustrated that games would say like, "Hey, your choices matter," but then the choices were like one of two things, and they only sort of kind of mattered. But then when I would play some games where I see, "Hey, this actually does matter," I said, "Hey, I want to flesh out like this more." So with the Essence system, like, no, every choice you make in the game has some impact on your character, on the world. And so that lengthens development time by a long time. And so I see why other devs have sort of cut the corners here. But I decided, hey, no cutting corners. I'm going to do this. And that resulted in 4 years of dev time. But I think maybe in the end it'll be worth it.
Hopefully, I don't say hopefully in the sense of that I hope it works. I just mean hopefully that you feel at the end it's worth it, because I think the idea is unique, because if I understood it correctly, the way that those essences work are not going to be coming down to you putting numbers into something. Let's say, as another RPG where you would bump up your speech or your bartering or lock picking or what have you, and those skill set, those numbers are what tests go against. But this seems like it's your choices are going to be in the background influencing what each of these essences is going to be, and then I'm assuming or presuming that as certain events come up in the game or conversations with people or what have you, that those background choices, those background stats are going to be what influences things based on everything that you've done. Did I
Yeah,
understand correctly?
that's spot on. So you could think of the essences as like a personality type, and there's six of them. And as you make choices, you'll sort of have a main essence, but then the background essences also matter. And then there are sort of checks throughout the game to say, hey, are you the correct essence to pass this thing? Or sometimes you'll get along with the character better if you're a certain essence. So it's sort of like a personality type. I think a lot of people compare it to like Harry Potter Hogwarts houses, where there's sort of a broad personality type for each house. This is sort of the same way, just with you have six, and as you make choices, these values sort of fluctuate. I think it's just uh, I think I get a lot of mileage out of it. Now, the difficult part on the dev side is I've sort of said this is almost like creating six separate games in terms of content, but I really want that sense of adventure that each time you play and you make different choices, you see different things in different parts of the world, and you have different events happen. So, like I said, that lengthened dev time a lot, but it really, to me, I really like games where you feel like it's what you experience is sort of your own personal thing, and you can talk to someone and have two separate experiences with the same game. I really like that sense of adventure. So, it really came down to, hey, I've got to put in the hours to make sure each six of these essences have enough content to make you really feel, like this is your thing. You made the choices. The results and the consequences are something coming from you. Um, so I really hope that gets through to people. That's sort of the main hook that I hope can really draw people in.
Definitely, yeah, and yeah, like I said, I hope that works out as well because, like I said, I think it's really unique, and it sounds like you're really passionate about it, and you put a lot of thought behind it, and fingers crossed for you that other people are as receptive to it as you hope they are. Because I said it, I'll say it again. I think it's just a great idea of how it's going to handle that versus a static number that you get to choose when and how to increment as a instead it's dynamic, and you might not think your choices are going to do certain things, and it's always nice when RPGs, or just games in general, aren't as black and white about what your decisions are going to do. And I think a lot of a good chunk of game series, Shin Megami Tensei for example, it does a great job of that, where you don't always know what you're doing and how it's going to influence your alignment, or in this case your essences. And you just those choices matter in ways that you aren't able to easily metagame. And I think, like I said, I think that's just a fantastic approach, because it, like you said, it will make replayability an even better, a better experience, because you can intentionally play differently and see just how much different it gets.
Right. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of replayability, so that's one of the key. That was always one of the key things that I wanted to keep in mind. That you can just make a few different changes, a few different choices, and you can see a whole new breadth of content.
And yeah, and I think that's absolutely fantastic. Now, how did you get into developing and making games? Because you've said you've been working on this for 4 years now. Uh, so what is it that made you get into wanting to do this?
Yeah, so when I was really young, I think it started with pixel art. And this was way back in the day. This would have been like 2005, 2006. Back then, like Pokemon spriting was really big. So I got into a lot of like, custom Pokemon spriting, just editing the pixel art, things like that. And that eventually led me to RPG Maker, which was a huge influence on me because back then, the RPG Maker community, it was sort of more underground than it was today. It was like smaller, and I loved that. Just being able to make something, and even if it was just using boring assets that they provided, just being able to make something always really brought me in. And then that brought me into mods, and sort of ROM hacking, and that did start with Pokemon. So I was a ROM hacker back in the day, for a few years, and I think I'm credited on a few ROM hacks that never went anywhere. But just that sort of love for game design and tinkering with things started about then. And then when I got into college, I did take a couple game design courses in college. I eventually switched majors a couple times, but that was just me. And then in 2014, I had some roommates, and we were all sort of in this sort of game dev. They were all really passionate about games. So we actually had a Kickstarter in 2014, which failed miserably. This was a Kickstarter for Glitched, and I think we just sort of jumped in way too soon. And then 2 years went by, and during those 2 years, I sort of honed my skills. I think I got better at pixel art. I sort of saw what was working. I spent a lot of time just in RPG Maker trying to get Glitched to sort of be how I imagined it in my head. And once we had a working demo, which we didn't have for 2014, I said, hey, I think we can do this again. The demo's really good. I'm getting really good feedback on it. We've built up a little bit of a community, so let's try again. And in 2016, we had a huge success on Kickstarter. I think we did like 10 times what we were expecting, in terms of support on Kickstarter, and that just went right into Glitched. And now it's 2021, and Glitch is about to be released, and I'm sort of looking ahead to see what's next for me. And that's sort of a big question mark. I think I do want to stay in the industry and do something else, and work on another game or maybe find a job within the industry. But I think I'm always going to be making games. I think it's always been a passion, even back in my RPG Maker days. I sort of knew this was sort of what helped me wake up every morning and got me excited to just live life.
And that's great to hear, and especially uh, going from pixel modifying, I guess you would say, spriting, to just the ROM hacking and the mods and everything. That's pretty great to hear. And based on all of your experience, from start to current, I would say, do you have any advice that you would give to those seeking to get into the industry, or maybe even yourself back then?
Yeah, I wish if I could go back and tell myself in like 2014, I think the first thing would be to go slow. The game industry isn't going anywhere. Your idea is not going anywhere. Before you jump in and you do all the things, just go slow. Build your skills. Um, have a good idea of what you want to do, whether that's finding a job or making a certain type of game. Build up slowly. Don't start with the biggest possible thing you can do. Maybe make something small first to sort of test your ideas, right? Don't be afraid to use things like RPG Maker or Game Maker to just sort of get a feel for what it is you want to do, right? And while you're doing that, you can build an audience, even just a screenshot, a concept art. People like to see that stuff on Twitter, on Tumblr. People want to see that and they like that stuff. So, go slow, build an audience, be consistent, right? If this is something you really love, it's going to be some type of work, so you got to work at it. And yeah, I think just go slow. Like, the game industry isn't going anywhere. You can take time to develop your skills. If I would have taken a year or two to just really hone in before 2016, I think I could have cut my development time in half. But because I think I maybe jumped in a little too quickly, the planning and the sort of base wasn't there is readily for me. I think if it comes time for me to make another game, I think I could do it in a half the time because I sort of know what it takes to sort of go slow, to sort of set up that concrete foundation to build something on. So yeah, I think just take it easy, go slow, build your skills, build a community, and I think everything else comes after that.
And that all makes good sense. And thank you for sharing that and that advice. And I think the statement you made about in the future you think you could do it faster. I think realistically that's just something that comes with experience, just because you know it's an iterative process, right? Like as you trial things, as you try things, and this also goes back to you saying just try some things, smaller versions or what have you. But as you do that, you get better ideas of what works best for you and all of that. So hopefully for you as well, that's something that works in the future.
Yeah, I,
'Cause
I think like it's advice you hear all over the place, but for good reason, right? To start small and to build from there. I think that's like really critical advice. And I think a lot of if you're like an aspiring game dev, like take that to heart. It's not just advice that gets thrown around everywhere. There's a good reason, right? And you maybe you won't know that good reason until you're halfway through development and you realize, hey, I've got to go back from the start because the foundation wasn't good enough because I didn't take that time. I mean, we definitely had a bit of that with Glitched, right? I think we got about a year in, and I said, hey, like I need to take some time just to reevaluate, to sort of make the mechanics blend together better, to sort of build a better foundation. And then once I did that, development was so much easier. But for that first maybe year and a half, I think it was really hard to find our footing because I think there maybe was some lack of preparation on that end. And I think, like I said, the game industry isn't going anywhere. Your idea is not going anywhere. Take the time because I think it's definitely in the end you'll be thankful that you did.
Definitely. And yeah, as a developer myself, and I think this sort of speaks to just the uh what's the word I want to use? The I don't mean this in a negative way, just because I know sometimes it can be taken that way, but I think that speaks to the inexperience of each person. When you hear the advice of, oh yeah, take it slow or start with something small, and you kind of have your ego in the back of your head going, no, 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 I'll be fine to do this. And then and from personal experience as well, like midway through a project or what have you, you'll be sitting there going, oh, I made terrible mistakes, and then you
Yeah.
have to think of how much you can salvage, how fast you can salvage, and what all needs to get rewritten. And like you said, it's advice that's given out a lot, and I think I think the more it's said, the more it becomes apparent that everyone is saying that kind of in like hindsight.
Right, I
Um,
definitely agree. Like, there's definitely a game dev, someone is like who wants to do this listening right now, who says, that's good advice, but I don't really think it applies to me. I know what I'm doing. I can do this. And then that was definitely me in 2015. But in hindsight, looking back now, hey, that advice was actually really good. So maybe this is just sort of a curse. You have to experience it before you know, right?
I'm
But
starting to think
maybe it
so.
doesn't
Yeah.
have to be for you if you're listening now. Maybe you can take the time to learn. But at the same time, some of it is you kind of got to learn you got to, learn the lesson before you really can take it in, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Now, I'm going to kind of move it back. We went back to your beginnings and how you got into making games. I'm going to go back a little further. And did you have a favorite game that you enjoyed playing as a child? And, what game was that? And what about that game is what made it your favorite?
I like this question. There's so many games that come to mind. I think it has to be Pokemon, and I'd say Pokemon Crystal version. I think when the first original Pokemons that was Red and Blue launched, I was still maybe a little too young to sort of really grasp it. But I think by the time the second versions in Pokemon Crystal came around, I was at that perfect age where I could, read everything. Everything made sense to me, and I could sort of dig into it more than I sort of had games in the past. Because I think I had the Super Nintendo. We didn't have a ton of games, and games were sort of something I could do, but I didn't really get them. I'm a little kid at that time, but I think Pokemon Crystal was sort of that transition to me just sort of games were a fun little toy to now like, hey, I'm really going to invest my time, and this is like a form of entertainment to me and like art rather than just a little gimmick that you get for your birthday or whatever. So I think that's like the first game where I have these really like vivid concrete memories of you know playing as much as I can, really going through each Pokedex entry and reading every little thing I could and looking at every skill and checking every little corner of the map and just sort of falling in love with the game world, which I didn't really do that before. Um, so I think that was like a turning point, and that sort of makes that game sort of special to me. And I think a lot of people may have these games, and it's almost I can go back and play it and still sort of feel that the affection for it.
And and that's a great feeling to have. I love going back to some of the games that I have fond memories of for, whatever reason, and being able to be back in that position. Like for example, like I can start up a Link to the Past, and immediately I am reliving that memory of where I was, how I started up, and all of that. And I think that's just an amazing experience to be able to get to have repeatedly, because that says a lot to just how much those games mean to us for whatever personal reasons, whether we share them or not or what have you. But I think that's just great that it's positive nostalgia, not rose tinted glasses or what have you, but it's actually making you feel good. And I just think that's great.
Yeah, I mean the discussion around nostalgia, like I think there's definitely some, misplaced nostalgia and stuff, but with that, I think everyone has that game, where you can just go and there's no rose tinted glasses. You can go back to it and just like, a smell or a song or something, you sort of get all those feelings from back then and they just sort of no matter even if the game maybe isn't technically perfect, it doesn't really matter. Like you're just so it just brings you back in time for just that moment. I can even just hear a little song or see a screenshot and I'm immediately like transferred back to that point in time where games sort of became a thing for me. um
And like I said, that's fantastic to have. I'm glad that you have that feeling. I hope a lot of other people have that feeling as well, just because, for those that have experience, it's just great to hear. And like what you were describing that, I was having my own little moment with some other games thinking on that because it's something I do think on often. And just having that triggered from just another positive conversation from someone else's enjoyment is great as well, just because like I said, I think it's just a wonderful thing, a wonderful form of nostalgia to hold. Like you said, you can just hear the tune or see the screenshot or what have you. I just like I said, I can't speak enough to it for how fantastic I think that is, and thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think, I think it's what that sort of stuff is what sort of makes video games more of a community than I think some other forms of art, right? I think like with games and just the hours we put into it, I think it's really easy to find people who feel the same way as you, which sort of lends. I think you sort of have the rise of video game communities right now, and I think those sort of feelings of adventure and stuff really bind people together that I think other forms of entertainment have a hard time of doing or do it less effectively than video games do.
I I would agree with you on that. Because I think for me the best way I can put it is for video games it's a I'm trying to think of this way. You're driving the experience. You're driving it forward. The actions that are happening are from you and the choices you're making. Whereas, not to speak down against a TV show's community or what have you, but most of that is largely a watching experience. And the experience that you're also going to have, you might have a very personal one to one with a few people that are enjoying it with you at that time. Or if you meet people, you can talk about it. However, it's largely still something that you watch. And whereas, with a video game, you're there, you're the one doing it. And it's, everyone else can share their stories about what they've done. And it's just, I feel a far more relatable uh, uh, community or just a relatable thing.
Yeah, I definitely agree. That sort of level of like personal investment, I think, with a video game is much different than something like a movie, which I think leads to sort of this feeling of community people can have around game. It doesn't exist as much as it does, or that happens like more rarely for things like movies and books and TV shows, right?
Exactly, exactly. And on the topic of Pokemon Crystal being where you kind of got into it or cemented that one as your favorite, I think that's probably the best one to have started on. And I don't mean this in a bad way, because Pokemon's done a lot, it's lasting and all of that, but being able to m- bypass red and blue and yellow, um, just by the nature of being a little too young, I think is really good. Just because, gold, crystal, silver, they were the ones that really cemented the mechanics and how everything is going to work moving forward. So it's it's kind of like getting in on the better version of the best version to start at, I think.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think a lot of those mechanics at the time sort of doomed me that I wanted every game to be like Pokemon going forward, right? I wanted that customization. I wanted to build my team to pick out the skills. I wanted to be able to go back and play again and do different strategies and build different teams and even tackle things in different orders, which Pokemon kind of let you did. There was some openness to them. And I don't know if it doomed me or if it set my expectations too high, but just playing those hours and hours of Pokemon Crystal, those had 16 badges versus the 8 from before. So just that giant world. I don't know if that sort of doomed me going forward looking at RPGs, but it set the bar so high that I can still go back to Pokemon Crystal and say, man, like I wish games could do it like this. You know what I mean? So those mechanics, I think, the RPG customization sort of obsession that I have definitely started there.
And yeah, like I agree completely with what you're saying for Gen 2. Silver is my favorite Pokemon, despite starting earlier. Um, Now, just on the topic of Pokemon, before we move on, because you had mentioned going through and absorbing and reading all of the Pokedex entries, and this is something I don't think I've ever had someone bring up, and I kind of want to jump on the chance to say this, or maybe even have a little back and forth on it, but it's absolutely nonsense what a lot of those Pokédex entries said, is it not?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But I
Like
think like the sort of like out there like craziness of it like made them super memorable. Like I can even just like off the top of my head, I think this was Gen 4, I think, but this was like Driftbloom, who would like the Pokedex entry said like he would pick up small children and like float away with them. Like this is absurd, but they really stuck in your head for like this sort of craziness and this sort of little attention to detail that here's just it's sort of tucked away. You got to scroll down a little in the Pokedex, but just these little tiny insights into like the Pokemon's personality. This kind of stuff hooks me in games. This is what I'm drawn to when I play.
mhm. And I just want to add on to that, because a lot of people will take what the Pokédex says as um, the hard truth, and I personally refuse to believe anything the Pokédex really says, just because I'd come at it from the approach of every entry is from an unreliable narrator or what have you, because just some of them are so absolutely nonsensical that it's like, no, I refuse to believe that, like you said, this one Pokemon picks up small children and just floats off into the sunset with them.
Yeah, I think like I think I've heard, some fan theories that hey, it's all written from like the perspective of the kid playing, right? Like you're a little kid on this Pokemon journey, so whatever you're sort of thinking up is what the Pokedex entry says. But I think the absurdity of them is what makes it, right?
Oh,
This
yeah.
like heightened level of I don't know reality or like jokes or whatever that it just sticks in your head for the absurdity of it, which I like that sort of thing.
Exactly. I'm not discrediting what they say. I'm not, going against or, speaking down to it. I'm just saying the absurdity of it is I refuse to believe that that is how they actually function in their own world. And I really like the theory that you just mentioned, how it's a child saying it, because that makes perfect sense. Just because I refuse to believe that, a Professor Oak or what have you is looking at that Pokemon going, "Yeah, this makes sense. This is exactly what happens." And I love the idea that it's a child. I'm going to use that myself now when I talk about it, and, you know, make that the headcanon that I have as well, cuz it makes the most sense.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I'm all for the headcan. I think what you think the game is trying to tell you or what you think it is, go for it, right? I think with any art, it's all for you to decide, right? Once the thing is out there in the world, it's all up to you to sort of interpret it, right?
Exactly, exactly. Now, I think you've touched on some of the topics from the next question, but what is it that makes gaming enjoyable to you now? And, how do you enjoy gaming now?
This is something I think a lot of people are feeling. I feel like I've become maybe a little jaded and maybe a little too picky, which is something I'm trying to work on. I feel like I do a little bit too much of like, hey, I've got to find the perfect game to sort of match up with what I want to play right now. Um, and I don't know if this is just something, I'm an adult now, I have responsibilities. I don't have as much time to sort of, spend the summer playing whatever games I want. I've sort of got to pick through things with a little bit more critical eye. And I think that's actually sort of made me not enjoy games as much. So I think I sort of need to give up some of that like pickiness that I've developed. And I think a lot of people are this way where we want the experience to sort of be perfect instead of being an experience that you just go into as a kid. You buy a game, you almost had no idea what you were buying. Either a parent got it for you or you just saw it on the shelf. And so you were sort of rolling the dice, but that meant you sort of came to everything with like an open mind. Where now I feel with game reviews and sort of let's plays and reviews and sort of how much attention so how much you can see of a game before playing it. You can almost spoil it before you even see anything about, like, before you even get to play it. So I think right now how I enjoy it, how I enjoy gaming in general, is I try to know as little bit as possible about games that I like. So one of the series I'm super obsessed with is like the Dark Souls series. So when I see, like, I think Sekiro was the latest one from them, I looked at nothing. I just knew I'm buying this game and I'm gonna play it. And even if there's things I don't like about it, which in Sekiro would be, hey, you couldn't customize your build as much as you could in past Dark Souls. I don't really care. I loved that game, even though it was missing some elements that I tend to think of are games that I'm going to enjoy, right? But I really, really liked it, partially because I think I just went in with an openness that I don't really have when I feel like I pick up a game that I've sort of seen too much of, right?
And that makes perfect sense. And yes, I can relate to that as an overall whole. Because one of the reasons I wanted to start this podcast and talk to developers or people related to the industry was because I myself was becoming jaded. I was becoming incredibly picky with games. My experience was just negative all the time. Even on games I really enjoyed, I was struggling to not be negative. And I don't mean that in the sense, I was becoming incredibly toxic publicly, because that's something that's horrible and definitely shouldn't be happening. But I was becoming toxic like privately about games, where all I would do is talk about the negatives of a game or how I didn't like a game. And it was really hard and rare for me to talk about the things I enjoyed. And fundamentally, that's not a good thing, because like you've maybe experienced in the same or different terms, is you start approaching all the games, and you're not able to enjoy them, and you want to enjoy them, but you're stuck in a negative headspace, and there's just nothing about it. And it's good to hear that your solution to getting past that was to go in kind of blind, because that if that helps, and that's going to be your what makes it work for you, hopefully that's something that might work for others. For me personally, it's just actually thinking of games positively and talking to people has made a huge change for me. And it's kind of like the whole thought process of just think better. And I know that's a really slippery slope to try and align that with certain things, because it's that doesn't work for a lot of things. Or typically when people say, well, just think happy thoughts or whatever, it's not used in a place where it's applicable. But for video games, at least for me, thinking positively has made done wonders. And yeah, just trying to get out of that the jaded hold or what have you is a struggle. And it's always nice to hear that other people are finding their own ways to escape that.
Yeah, I see a lot of like memes and conversations and stuff about this sort of like burnout with video games. And I don't know how much of this is due to just like culture, like how quickly we're consuming content these days, or how much of it is a lot of people who are like making these things are more my age now. They've sort of been in the video game industry playing games for a while, and now they're sort of unable to sort of capture that same joy. So like the advice of, hey, just like look at this in a different way, like be more positive. I guess it sounds sort of like, okay, this isn't really like useful advice, but I think the more you sort of think about it, the more true it is. I think a lot of it comes down to like I need to just take that time and just enjoy what I'm doing. Don't worry about, like, I can take an hour a day, and I need to do this more often, and I find myself not doing it as much as I'd like. I can take that hour and just enjoy something. I don't have to, critically dig into it. I don't need to think about every little purchase I'm making. Just sit down with something, forget about the world, forget about my responsibilities, and just for an hour, just enjoy it. Enjoy, whatever it is that's in front of me, and have a good time. I think like that. I think the fact that even that is becoming difficult for a lot of people is really sad. So I think, finding a way to do that, whether that's thinking better, going in blind, taking the time to play with someone, I think is really important too. Things like this, I think we all need a little bit more of this. Um, and I think, it can be difficult today to sort of do that for yourself, whether you feel like it's a waste of time or you're not being productive or something like that. I think it's important. I think it's important to sort of, for me, looking at the dev side, getting to play other games and sort of enjoying them for what they are, I think could make you a better dev. Could make you appreciate things on a sort of different level that can help, bring the passion to whatever you're doing.
Exactly. And I want to touch on something that you mentioned, because I hadn't thought of it in this way until, you started the way you were describing things. And almost it's almost in the same sense of, a lot of people, they're doing their own mental wellness, where they're meditating, or really struggling for the right word for this, but it's, thinking on things. It's meditating, but it's thinking on things, being more in the moment. Um I'm really upset with myself that I can't think of the actual term for this. But the what you were saying is almost, to me, it made me think of it, treating games in the same way, that, meditating and focusing on self wellness or what have you isn't always the same for person A, for person B, for person C. And maybe just living in the moment, like you said, and just clearing an hour and not stressing about everything surrounding that hour, and just enjoying the game, can do wonders for your approach to, playing games or enjoying games. But it could also potentially work as just good mental wellness for yourself as a whole, because I know a lot of people, they play games to relax, and being able to find ways to clear everything around that hour of playing games, whether it's having having a game that lets you ignore everything else, like I've spoken with a previous developer, or another developer that I spoke with, their approach was, on Saturday or Sunday mornings, they would make like cinnamon rolls, and there was um this whole thing surrounding it, where they make cinnamon rolls and enjoy their game and eat the cinnamon rolls and all that. But I think, like, I think if I think everyone having something like that, but treating it more like mental wellness and not just the ritual surrounding games or what have you, I think that could do wonders, and just help refocus on what exactly it is you're doing and how it's beneficial. I
Yeah,
don't
one
know
of
if
the
that makes
things.
sense.
Yeah, I actually like. I totally see this, and one of the things I've been doing to sort of keep me in that zone, I'll set an alarm for like an hour, however long I have, and then this is sort of a weird little thing, but I'll always play the game in full screen and turn off my second monitor. I think when I don't do this, I have a tendency to sort of get away from the game. I'll go on Google, I'll watch something on the side, but just for that hour, I just want to be just me in the game, nothing in the background, just focus and just have fun. Don't worry about what comes next or what I have to do later on in that day. For me, full screen the game, turn off my monitor, put an hour on the alarm, put my phone away, and just play. Just like almost as if I was a kid and I had no other responsibilities. And for that hour, and like this is almost the sort of ritual element to it. And like you were saying, maybe someone has like hey, Sunday morning, it's cinnamon rolls and it's gaming. Like for me, it's this. Like, late at night, just me, a screen, the game, a controller, keyboard, whatever, and just playing and just enjoying and just tuning other things out. And I didn't always do this. I think for, 2 or 3 years, I was sort of falling off um with even playing games and really like being someone who was consuming gaming content. I was sort of only playing things I was super comfortable with that were sort of boring me, like, League of Legends for the 5 millionth time, right? And while I think, I still enjoy that, I wasn't maybe having fun or like letting go, de-stressing or anything, which to me, that's what I want when I play video games, right? Sure, it can be engaging and difficult, but at the end of the day, I want it to be enjoyable and something that takes me away from the responsibilities of the day, right? So really, I guess forcing myself, even though that sounds kind of negative, there's some truth in that. Forcing myself to just sort of enjoy games um, is really important. I think it's sort of that time that I don't really get any time else, just for me, just to do something that I like. and just for me, which is something I don't do during the other 23 hours of the day. That's all given to something else, whether it's glitched, family, friends, working outside of glitched, whatever. Just for that hour, it's just for me, and I choose to spend with video games, right?
Exactly, and yes, there isn't much I can say to follow up on what you've said because I agree, and I think it's a good way to think about it. And like I said, everything I have to say on that topic has been said, and kind of put into the nicer or similar words or expanded words, opinions, what have you, by you. So yes, I agree, and I think yeah, that's I think that's the way to do it, and I think in the long run is something that can just benefit. Like it doesn't hurt you if you can afford the time or afford the ability to do that.
Yeah, definitely. And even, a half hour. When you were a kid, you could turn something on, play it for 10 minutes and be fulfilled. So I try to just block off, even if I only have a half hour during a day, just some time just for you, right?
Exactly, exactly. Now, Nico, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. However, before we did this, we were discussing one topic that you were particularly passionate about, and I want to make sure that we have enough time to discuss that and explore it and see where it goes. Especially because you have, and I don't mean this in a negative way. You have a first Kickstarter that didn't succeed. You have a successful second Kickstarter. You've spoken on building communities. So, how is it that you feel about the current landscape for games fandom and interactions with fans via, though, those communities like Discord or Twitter or Kickstarter?
Yeah, I think it can be really daunting, especially if you're just looking at like the headlines to be sort of an indie dev and what a lot of people see is like an oversaturated market. And I think if you're just looking at the headlines, that's definitely the feeling you're going to get. But I feel like this is there's sort of two aspects to this, and a lot of devs and a lot of new people like to focus on that first aspect that the market's saturated. There's 100 new games on Steam every single day, and all of this is true. But what 99 out of those 100 games don't have is a dev behind it who's really taking the time to build a community around a game. Like we started this conversation with, games and video games have a sort of way of building a community that I think other forms of entertainment don't do nearly as much, right? So I think if you're an indie dev, yes, the market might be saturated, but at the same time, there's never been so many people interested in playing games and discovering games as there are right now. There are people out there who want to play what you're making, right? Who want to sort of be there. People today are even more interested in starting with you from the beginning, which this wasn't really a thing. The Kickstarter era has sort of brought this to a thing where people want to be along for the ride. They want to see games sort of get built from the start and see it to its completion. So if you're scared that, hey, 99 of these Steam games released today aren't going to sell super well, they're just sort of released and forgotten about. What these, I think, games are missing is a community. And I think, today it's so easy to get people excited about what you're making. There are so many ways to get content out to people. And you don't even need a giant community to sort of see the effect it will have on you, right? Even 100 Twitter followers is enough to sort of get likes and get engagement and get feedback, right? When I was first starting, maybe for a couple months, I was upset, hey, my post is getting 1 or 2 likes. But then you just keep doing it. You keep reaching out to people. When you get comments, you respond, and you just, it builds over time. So this goes back to the advice of go slow. When you post your first screenshot, it's not going to get 300 likes. It's not going to get 300 retweets. It may get 1 or 2. Maybe someone finds it from looking at a tag. But you start there, right? You start slow. And as it builds, now you have suddenly a couple weeks have gone by and you got, maybe 200-300 followers, right? So I think games today, if you want yourself to stand out when it comes time for release, you've got to have that community built. There are people out there who want to play what you're making, but they also want to play what everyone else is making. So how do you get them, involved? You build a community. Discord is great. I love sort of my Discord community and what I've built over there and being able to get feedback every day now is just amazing. And talking to people who are just passionate about what I'm making, it sort of propels you. It's sort of like a snowball. As more people join in, you get more and more excited. You get more passionate to do what you're doing, and it sort of goes from there. Obviously, if you release your game on day one and you have none of this, yeah, no one's going to play it. There were 100 other games released on Steam today, right? But if you have this base of people built up, now they're all talking about the game on release, and people are going to hear that, and then they're going to jump aboard. And so the snowball keeps rolling, right? So I think it can be scary if you're, a new dev and you see this sort of, I guess, doom hanging over things like Steam and the oversaturation. But at the same time, it's so easy to reach people today, but you've got to be able to stick your hand out and say, hey, come over here and see what I'm doing, right? You've got to be willing to do that. And if you can't do that, I think you're going to have a difficult time bringing people in.
And yeah, that all makes perfect sense. I can't speak a lot to it just because I'm not someone that manages communities and what have you. But everything you're saying makes a lot of sense, and it's a good mentality to have because exactly you have if you have 100 people, 1,000 people, what have you, upon release talking about your game, that generates buzz, and it ripples out, and you get people that might otherwise not have known about your game or maybe not typically into that genre or what have you, now looking at it and possibly trying the demo or putting it on their radar to pick up when they have time or for what have you. So yeah, that makes perfect sense. Now I want to ask you this just because you mentioned it. Was Do you feel that the community was a big, like, did you had sorry, I'm trying to think of the best way to put it and not handle it insensitively, if that makes sense. um when you went from Kickstarter 1 to Kickstarter 2, I believe earlier you had mentioned that you started working on a community between then. Do you feel the community was something that helped make it such a big success on your second go?
Yeah, 100%. So when we first launched our first failed Kickstarter, the Kickstarter was sort of the first thing we did. So it was like our first Twitter post was the Kickstarter. Um, and this was 2014. So this was still in that era where there wasn't as much of a blueprint as I think there is now. I think today there's a much like more solid blueprint on how you should handle a Kickstarter. But back then, there were still some free for all elements to it. And so we just thought, hey, we have a good idea, and the idea is enough to get people on board, right? But obviously, this wasn't the case. What we didn't have were people who cared about the idea, right? And these are the most important people because these are the people who are going to tweet about it, who are going to make content, make fan art, who are going to tell their friends and their followers about it. So during that sort of 2 years between the failed Kickstarter and our successful Kickstarter, I was always posting on Twitter, on Tumblr, on where else was I posting back then? Wherever I could, YouTube videos, any way I could get a screenshot out, a little clip of gameplay, some concept art, a joke about the game, whatever. I put that out there. And like I said, it starts and it may be sort of demotivating at the beginning. You're getting one like, you're getting one retweet, right? Um, but if it's something you work on, right? And over this 2 years, this is what I did. I said, hey, maybe this style of tweet wasn't doing it for me. Maybe this art wasn't as good as it could be. And so you sort of get that feedback and you can work on it and you can build a community and people can join in, right? I think we had a post that did really, really well on Tumblr. And this was after a couple posts that did really, really poorly. Um, and it was just maybe I had improved the art a little bit. Maybe I had just learned how to sort of, I don't want to say market, but I guess that's the right word, how to market the game correctly, right? What you think is going to sell the game may not be what is actually going to sell the game. So what I noticed is all of the mechanics of the game were really great and people liked them, but the best way to sell the game was to just post screenshots of the jokes and the dialogue, right? Which were sort of, to me, that's sort of a secondary, like if I'm selling the game to, I don't know, a publisher or something, hey, it's got some humor. That's like, 2, 3 paragraphs in. But for Twitter, for Tumblr, the humor is number one. Everyone wants to see the jokes. Everyone wants to see the meta commentary. That's the stuff they love. That's the stuff to me that always went viral. I guess viral, my biggest successful tweets were always that. So sort of finding that, what do fans want to see from your game? That's, a process, right? So during that 2 years between my failed Kickstarter and this eventual successful one, there was a lot of learning that, right? And bringing people in slowly but surely. And that sort of launched when it was time for the second one. We had followers. So day one on Kickstarter, it wasn't $0 in the first hour. It was a couple thousand in the first hour because there were people who were ready and who were super excited, who were said, yeah, I'll jump in on this during your first hour. And that sort of snowballs you to propel the project through that 30 or 60 days where you're going to have the Kickstarter up.
Exactly. And, that makes perfect sense. And also, I imagine that is a big, I don't want to say validation because I think that's the wrong word. I think it carries the wrong connotations. But I imagine that's like a good feeling for you to see that there's other people that believe in not only the project, but believe that you're able to deliver on that project.
Yeah, I
right?
think validation's an okay word. I think, especially this is, game making is a creative field. And within this, it can be demotivating if you're posting work and nobody's looking at it, right? But when they do start, I think that sort of sense, I think a lot of people say, oh, everyone's obsessed with likes and retweets these days. Everyone's just obsessed with the number count. Okay, I could see the cynicism there. But at the same time, I think people sort of forget what these things represent, right? Obviously, if you're getting thousands and thousands of likes, it's really easy for you to say, oh, people just like the likes. They don't think about, okay, but for someone who's only getting 1 or 2 likes, that first tweet that, gets 50, 60 likes, that says something to that person, right? That says, hey, there are people out there who care, who enjoy this, and that can be super motivating, right? So I think the value of that to a small creator is super important, right? And if you're a small creator and you're not getting that, my advice is just keep going, keep working, make things better, right? And you'll get there, right? But yeah, that's how I see it.
Exactly. And you're right. You won me over on validation being the right word because you're right. I was looking at it from the standpoint of, it's kind of cynical or self-indulgent, but if you're smaller and those likes, that it is validating. It makes you feel better, and like you said, it gives you that motivation to move forward. And something that's related to this and related to validation or motivation or what have you. Recently, I don't know if you saw it or if you were affected by it or got drawn into it, but the topic of reviews for games in the indie sphere came up again. And I just like to get your take on it because you seem to have such a positive outlook on the community building aspect and having a good community. What's your opinion on the whole Steam reviews for just in general for user reviews?
Yeah, I think just the nature of Steam reviews, um, man, I go back and forth because I'll see games that have with Steam. If you're a developer, you want that coveted mostly positive status for reviews. If it goes yellow where it says like mixed reviews, suddenly your game isn't selling nearly as well. I think a lot of people today, it's sort of a difficult topic for me to talk about because there's so many angles you can approach it from. I think there's sort of a cloud of cynicism around games that can be really difficult to break. And I think reviews may sort of be the worst of it because I think it's really easy to say this game sucks and leave it at that. Where I think it's a little bit harder to say, here's why I like the game. If you say this game is good, it doesn't really carry as much weight as saying this game is bad, right? It's almost like we expect games to be good, that when it's bad, it's easy just to say this game sucks and that's all I have to say about it, right? This is sort of something I guess I worry about is sort of how I'm going to be received, how Glitched is going to be received. Will people click with it? Will they understand what I'm trying to do? And I don't know, is the sort of Steam review where sort of anyone can say anything about it, is this a really successful way of showcasing how audiences are actually feeling about a product? Because to me, I will only ever review something, let's say a restaurant. There's no point of me reviewing it and saying, "Hi, I had a great time." Nobody cares about that. But if I get food poisoning somewhere, I'm going to go and say, "Hey, I got food poisoning. This place sucks. Don't go there." So to me, I think the nature reviews sort of bring out the negative nature, because if you enjoy something, you don't really spend that much time thinking about it. You enjoyed it and you move on. Where if you didn't enjoy it, you want to sort of warn people that you didn't. And I think maybe that's the sort of cloud of cynicism hanging over us, is we feel it's easier to talk about things we hate than things we like. Um,
And
not
oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off
Yeah, I
there.
think that's not to say I think there's a lot of good people on Steam, really digging into why they like games. But I think even me personally, if I'm scrolling through the reviews, I'll scroll through all of the blue and I'll only read the red, right? I'll only read what's bad. And why do I do this, right? I don't know. It's just maybe it's like pre-programmed, right? And I don't know what the solution to that is on like Steam's end or on the player's end, right?
Exactly, and I know for the life of me, I don't remember who, but there was a woman, a psychologist, I believe she was, or someone in that sphere, that said that we're more inclined to, as you noticed, speak negatively of things, not the positives, because it's easier to say the negatives, and it's easier to pick out those negatives instead of the positives, because we kind of go in not we go in kind of biased, expecting good, and then being upset when the grass is the wrong shade of green, or whatever. And I think really what you kind of nailed on the head is one of the main arguments as to why positive reviews are such an important thing, and why a lot of developers, indie developers especially, are always asking for them. Because like you said, it's as many people have said, it's easier to be negative, whether it's because of the cloud of cynicism, or just human nature, or the psychology of it all, than it is to be nice, to be positive. And I think you know building up the community and encouraging positive reviews, I wonder if that's, this is far beyond me to really discuss and think on, but I wonder if the more communities are built, good communities are built, and have those communities encouraged to leave positive reviews, if that's happening all over the place, if the fundamental shift will happen, and then we start to see negative reviews as the rarity, so to say, whereas the positive ones are the more common ones, and have us looking towards what other people enjoy about a game. I don't really know where the conversation would go on that one. More of just a thought on my part there, but that's, I think, you kind of touched on it, and uh, didn't, kind of were going down that road, and I just sort of pushed the car there. But I've noticed a lot of other people saying like a very similar thing about the importance of positive reviews, and you kind of highlighted it uh, in a way that I think a lot of us, and myself included, would dance around it without getting there, like getting right to that point. And I don't know,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to say that negatively to you. I'm just meaning in general, because I myself would have probably did the same thing as you and danced around it, and just came to that realization as you were doing that.
Yeah, I think this is something that I sort of have fell into for a long time, where like I would go on YouTube and watch videos like, "Hey, here's why this game sucks," right? And you could go watch. There's people who will do hour, too long, 2 hour videos where they just break down a game and they point out every single flaw in it. And I think these videos are good and they have merit for certain reasons. But I think I started watching someone named Nitro Rad, and I really liked how he did reviews where he would point out the negatives. But even if a game was, maybe didn't live up to what he thought, he would really say, "Hey, look at this one thing about the game, and I really liked this thing about the game." So if you're someone who likes this, I think you can overlook the negatives if this is something you really want. And I sort of like that style of review. That, hey, if a game wants to be this thing, how about we sort of look at this as the main indicator of the game's worth? Right? Sure, maybe there are some elements of it that could be improved on, but hey, the game said it was, I don't know, an RPG crafting game, and look how well it nailed it. right? Like, I like that sort of review, I think, better, where we can sort of look for the good in things and talk about how well they did that thing. And yeah, I think it's important. I think negative reviews are important. If a game is fundamentally broken, obviously negative reviews are fine. Or if there's some flaw in it that maybe would make me not want to play it, I think those negative reviews are fine. But I think maybe this is just something personally I need to start doing is I need to start looking for what do people say about this game that's the best part about it, and do I connect with that thing, right? And I need to maybe start overlooking these sort of minor things that when I was a child, when I was a kid, I could play the worst game and still find myself enthralled with it. So I don't know what it is that changed from now to then. I could probably list 100 things, but I think at the end of the day, I need to start looking for the good in things rather than avoiding things because of the maybe bad aspects of them.
Exactly. And I think that's a perfect way to round right back up to some of the other conversations we had earlier that, it really might just be about being positive and thinking better about things instead
Yeah,
of
it sounds so lame, but it's so right.
exactly, I was going to say it feels a little preachy, but you know, I I don't think that's always bad. I don't think it's always wrong to be able to say, this that could really fundamentally just be it, that everyone just needs to relax and focus on the positives of thing, because there's in some cases there's nothing but negatives in our life, and I think having some time where you're just focusing on the positives and experiencing the positives, again, I think that's just personal wellness and meditation, and whatever your meditation may be.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think a little positivity in the gaming sector is, I think it can go a long way for just your enjoyment of video games. And it's something I'm really trying to do for myself. And I'm finding myself enjoying games in a way that I haven't done in like a very long time.
Exactly, exactly. Now, like I said before, I don't want to take up too much more of your time. However, if there was anything else you want to discuss other than the fandom interactions and all of that we just did, maybe a cool game that you've been enjoying or what you're doing or something you feel more people should just be aware of, by all means, the floor is yours. Jump on that soapbox, if you will.
Yeah, I've always been someone. I love RPG Maker games. I think there's a sort of freedom for developers to sort of do cool things with RPG Maker because it's so easy to make games. And I think it's sort of, I think there's a lot of like gems in there that I think a mainstream audience sort of misses. You have games like Off, which is sort of this cool RPG where it's sort of, there's a lot of abstract um, like a lot of abstract imagery, and it's sort of enchanting to play. It's sort of weird and mysterious, almost like a dark Earthbound. You have games like Yume Nikki, where you're sort of exploring the dreams of a character. Recently, you have Jimmy and the Pulsating Mass, which is sort of like a Earthbound dream world with sort of a family dynamic. Most parties in video games, it's like a group of adventurers, but no, this is a family sort of dealing with, personal trauma and stuff like that. I love these RPG Maker games that I sort of feel have these tiny, tiny communities, but there's just so much love, I think, put into these types of games. They're very personal, I feel, when I play them. But, something AAA, it feels like a product, which isn't always bad, right? A product guarantees quality. But these sort of little RPG Maker games, I think there's a lot of gems in them. And I think if you're just looking to play something that's, very personal and sometimes quick, these games aren't always, 50 hours stretched out. Sometimes they can be long, they can be RPGs, but there's a lot of small games you can play, like on an afternoon, like Yume Nikki, where you could just sort of get into it for an hour or two and enjoy what it is that's there. Um, these are games I feel sort of stay under the radar when there's just so much content there um, that I feel is underappreciated.
Definitely, and thank you for bringing that to my awareness and anyone else's awareness, because I myself haven't really gotten into them. However, I'm definitely going to take a look, because one of the things I like to do is when I talk to someone and they recommend something, that they've enjoyed, I feel at the very least it's worth looking into it, to see if it's something that's up my alley or something that I might also enjoy. Because how else do you get experience in new things if you don't make the attempt, right?
Right, definitely. And I think with video games specifically, there's just so many little communities and little games that are out there that are just sort of waiting for people to go play, right? It's really easy to find the big AAA stuff, but there's something I think a little more personal out there for you that if you want something very specific, it's out there. You've just got to look for it.
Exactly, exactly. And as well, can you please let everyone know where we can find more information about you? I'll include it in the episode descriptions as well. I'm gonna get these games information from you as well, because I want to make sure that they're also in the description for anyone that also might be interested.
Yeah, for me, you can go check out EnHouse Studios on Twitter. That's EnHouse Studios. I'm pretty active over there. You can also, if you just type in glitched Kickstarter on Google, I'm like the first result that pops up. So if you want a general look at glitched, a trailer and stuff like that, glitched is also on Steam. You can wishlist it over there, and from there, you can find all the links over there. But yeah, I'm pretty active on all of these sites. So, you can find me on Tumblr. You can find our Discord if you just look up Glitched Discord, and that's pretty active over there. We have a lot of people super hyped about Glitched over there. I'm also on Twitch, and that's under Neckboy. I try to stream twice a week, showing off Glitch, talking about RPGs, just sort of showing the development side of things. So you can check me out anywhere over there.
Awesome, awesome. Like I said, I'll make sure all of that information and whatever else we can put in there will be in the description for you, just so that people can get an immediate link there and not do what I do sometimes and make a typo and end up in weird places. But yeah, Nico, thank you again for making time to have this conversation with me, and thank you for joining us on the Red Tunic podcast.
Yeah,
As
thank
well as,
you. It was super fun. Thanks for having me.
no, I'm very happy that you enjoyed yourself. It was a great conversation. As I can tell, you're very passionate about a lot of what we discussed about, especially the game you're producing or making, and other RPG Maker games, just everything. So thank you for joining me and having such a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you. It was a really fun time.
And as well as a special thanks to Raul Jedkes for the use of the music from the title track from Road Steep. And if you like this podcast and want to support it and help it grow, please subscribe to receive the latest episodes and be sure to share it with those you think might also enjoy it. And be sure to join us next time for a conversation with someone. Bye now.